So in here, we should have a new, pretty affordable watch with a special trick up its sleeve, if watches had sleeves. Yeah, this one's got a function or complication that hasn't been seen on a watch in a long time, potentially decades. So yeah, let's whip it open, take a closer look at this thing and exactly how it works. Now, thanks to the brand behind this watch, which we'll see in a moment, who kindly sent this watch in for review. It's on loan and it will be going back to them. And I think they've sent me several different colours of this one, because each of these models do have a slightly different finish to them as well. And these are from Erebus Watches. So thanks to them for sending these across. This is the watch brand set up by Jody from the channel Just One More Watch. And they tend to focus primarily on, really good specs for the money, try and get the best finishing they can for the money. But like I said, this one has got something a little bit different in the functionality department. I'll whack each of these open. We'll start left to right. I'll show you what is going on here. I can't remember exactly what colours they've sent me or if I asked for specific ones. I've been extremely busy with some personal things in recent times. So I've actually had these sitting around for a little bit. So I've got red, green. I tell you, if there's a blue in here, it really would complete the trilogy. No, this one's a slightly different one. And here it is, or here they are. This is the new Erebus 24. And it gets that name really because of its function. Now, one thing straight out of the gate that I've noticed actually is that was a screw down crown there. Yeah, this watch only has an advertised 5 ATM rating, so that's an unusual combination. Either they're going conservative at 5 bar, most likely, or that's just something that they thought people would expect. I'm not quite sure with that one, but I'll first start with the design of this one. And as you can see, this is basically a field style watch. A field style watch that comes in 2 different sizes, which I forgot there for a moment, but yeah, it looks like we've got one of the 40mm options here on the left, while this green one is 38mm. But there's also one other difference between these two that you may notice if you look closely. Take a look at those markers around the edge. Now, one is in 24-hour presentation, whereas the other just has the more standard arrangement that you see on most watches. And the clever thing with these watches is they change. Yeah, this watch features a Miyota 9000 series movement with a custom module, apparently. Now, unfortunately, you can't see that through the case back. Not sure whether it's something you'd be able to spot anyway. But yeah, when the watch clicks across past 12, apparently this shifts. So we'll be giving that a go. It signifies the difference, I guess, between AM and PM. You'll find a link to this watch, by the way, in the video description if you do want to check it out for yourself. And if you do like it, these are available quite substantially cheaper at a pre-order price. They're currently £369 on pre-order, rather than the standard $439 at regular price. That's either $499 or $599 USD. Now, as for my first impressions of the overall looks of this thing, I think, to be honest, I'm still waiting for a watch that I love the look of from Erebus. I thought the Ascent, for example, their dress watch, was a good-looking watch. Wasn't absolutely gorgeous. And then I think the art style for most of their other watches just isn't quite what I'm after. And that's to some extent the same here. This is definitely towards the better end of the spectrum, but I wouldn't say that I love the aesthetics of this out of the box. You can see the design here is almost halfway between a field style watch and a pilot watch. It's got that kind of crosshair behind the hands there too. And overall fairly large numbers. Also think that seconds hand there with a point on the end also makes it look a little bit piloty potentially, as does the case itself. Has that kind of tall looking bezel, as you can see here, which leaves the dial quite large on these models. Does give you better visibility. So funnily enough, I can't actually see them list the case material anywhere here. But this is almost certainly 316L stainless steel with some really nice brushing as well. This one's an entirely matte finish, I think. Yeah, this one is entirely matte with mostly horizontal brushing on this one. Is a little bit on the tubby side too. I'll have to get the calipers out as well on this one. And while the finishing isn't particularly complex, it is very, very well done. Extremely fine brushing at least. Up top, we've got a flat sapphire crystal and a pretty good one as far as legibility goes. You'll get the great scratch resistance without making too many compromises in the visual department. Far from the haziest that I've seen, so much closer to the average mineral crystal, I'd say, when it comes to legibility. They're also saying here that this one has got BGW9 Lume, which is usually pretty good stuff. Interested to see how that'll interact with the hour markers as well. See if there's any on those peeping through. The water resistance on this one, while it does have that screw down crown and that case back, is maybe a little disappointing. 5 ATM. Now there are some pretty famous field watches that have got low water resistance like this, from the likes of Marathon and Hamilton as well. Those are arguably, I think, even lower at 3 ATM. And while 5 ATM is maybe considered just enough, I don't know, I expected from a brand like Erebus they would maybe go 10 bar minimum for a field watch like this. But like I said, maybe they're just deliberately underpitching it, perhaps. Not sure here. I expect it would probably be okay in most scenarios, but yeah, just maybe expected that 10 mark. Now this watch apparently comes with 2 straps, which I must have missed. Maybe my review samples here don't come with them, but I think by default here it says that you'll get 2 straps. So you get this kind of color matched leather strap for starters, and then some other type of extra military style strap, which I'm guessing here like nylon NATO style bands potentially. These leather ones are okay. Do get the impression that because the edge here is so right angled that this may just start to peel after a bit of time, that this is just going to get scuffed by the edge of the buckle. But it does have painted edges here, which will help a little bit. Overall feel is okay. Just, I don't know, just feels maybe a tiny bit rubbery, plasticky. This black one maybe feels a bit better than the other two. Not sure if it's just because it's been worn in a bit more, but it's got a reasonable amount of holes, quite close together. Also has those quick release spring bars, and those spring bars are curved, as you can see. So you don't get this on watches all too often, but it's a way that they can accommodate straps like this on watches with pretty short lugs. There's also a little bit of an indentation in the case there too. And all 3 straps are basically a perfect color match to the dial, which they need to be applauded for. And as you can see, here are those different dials I was talking about. So on the left here with the red one, that's more of just a plain finish, whereas the central one has a textured finish in the middle, and then the one on the right is completely different. This has like a topographical look to it, like something you'd see on a map, albeit grayscale, which makes this one possibly the most interesting of the 3 in the flesh. Looks quite tactical without being boring, actually. Probably my favorite of these 3. But yeah, let's get the exact measurements, especially of these 2 different sizes, and then we'll have a go at that special function, eh? So starting with the 40mm version. How is it exactly 40mm? The answer is no, it's actually exactly 40.5 wide I've got there, with a lug to lug of 46.6. And these aren't the thinnest watches by any stretch, just a hair under 12mm. I've got that as 11.9. And this one's got a 20mm lug width. Crown on this model, by the way, does feel very solid indeed. Thought I'd mention that. Nice and responsive, and no grittiness really on the crown. Now the smaller model, let's see, is that exactly 38? Yeah, this time it is. Does look quite substantially shorter here too. Yeah, 44.6. But it's still quite chunky. Yeah, exactly the same thickness, 11.9, which does leave you with quite a different shape, I'd say. From side on, this one is a little bit more bulbous, or at least proportionally more bulbous. Now I'll try both of them on in a second, but before then, while I've got my hands free, let's give this custom complication a go. Now, because I know this is AM, it should surely tick over straight away for me here. Wow, there's just a slight little tick kind of noise, like a slight clunk. But it wasn't as loud as I've maybe thought, considering a couple of the clips I've seen of this watch. Yeah, really quite satisfying. I wonder if I go backwards, if it will click back. No, it won't. Okay. Probably not the healthiest. I should probably avoid doing that if I can. But I'll go all the way back around and we'll just try it once more. Boom, and that happens instantly. So yeah, pretty cool piece of kit this. Now, I've seen watches where the hour markers do change through the day, but not specifically from AM to PM like this. I've seen some people online say that they wish that it had like a 0 at the top instead of 24, I think it was, or that they wished it switched over at 1 instead, which might be where you would actually need this. But to be honest, I don't particularly care either way. Guess maybe that does make more sense, but I wonder if maybe it would be harder to manufacture, because something you've got to consider is just because something might be a slightly better idea, it might be significantly more complicated to make, especially for such a small watchmaker as Erebus. These guys haven't been around for long at all, and I can't imagine that they've got the biggest team. So to be able to even, get something like this made is quite impressive, I'd say. I'm not exactly sure how it works with these movement manufacturers. I would assume maybe that they purchased these Miyota movements as standard and then added this on themselves, maybe. But who knows? Maybe they've been in contact with Miyota and they're doing this together to some degree. Oh, and I've just noticed a slight difference here too. So the bigger one has 10 ATM, as you can see there at the bottom, which is twice that on the smaller model. How unusual. So I wonder whether they could just fit better seals in the bigger one, maybe? That is, a little bit disappointing if you got a smaller wrist like me. And I do wonder, considering that these are using the Miyota 9000 movement, which is well known for its slimness, how much extra thickness maybe has come from that custom module, because that could, to some degree, explain the thickness here if this wasn't a choice. It does seem that the hands are quite close there to the top of the crystal, so maybe that has just added on a bit of extra, a bit like when you compare a mechanical hand-wound watch to a automatic watch. We do have drilled lugs, by the way, as you can see here, so you can pop them straps off pretty easily, but your options may be limited a little bit just because of the tightness of the lugs in a way. If the strap isn't thin, you may be required to get curved spring bars like this. So we'll start with the smaller one of the two. This is the green 38mm on wrist, and I have encountered just a slight problem, that being that even on the final adjustment hole here, this watch is still too baggy on my wrist, which is a bit of a shame because you'd expect for, a sub 40mm watch that if you've got a smaller wrist, it shouldn't be totally out of your range. But I probably would have to get some sort of replacement strap with this one or try and shoehorn in another hole there. And it's a shame that the holes don't extend further just because, it's not like it's overhanging my wrist tons here. It's not like the strap's cartoonishly long or anything. It's just the potential placement of the holes. Like these holes seem better suited to those with larger arms. My wrist is small, 6¼ inches. But yeah, I would have expected, if your wrist is this large, you'll probably be going for the 40mm anyway, surely. But yeah, this is the sort of watch that's kind of pushing the boundaries for me with a field watch. Normally my wrist best suits like 36mm field watches, something about the style of them. And I think in general, when you've got wider dials like this, they just look a bit bigger than they actually are. This looks to me more like a typical 39.5mm watch on my wrist, but the lug to lug is actually pretty short. You'll see here there's no overhang, which is good, and also fits pretty nicely from the side. Do like the brushing on this, as you can see, it does glisten quite well, potentially because of that extra inclusion. Not the thinnest watch you'll see. Reminds me a little bit of one of those new Seikos. I can't remember the code name, maybe SRPG33. I tried the green one of one of those, and that had a very similar vibe in a way, almost like a field watch, but with hints of aviation theming to it. And this watch is, I'd say, probably better than that one. Certainly beats it in the spec department, no doubt. Here's the 40.5mm option on wrist. And while it's a lot bigger here, as you can see, definitely too large in that respect, ironically, as you can see, it stays on my wrist better. Not sure whether it's the hole placement or it's just got more holes, I think. Yeah, it's just got more holes, so it extends around the wrist further, meaning that this one actually fits quite well in terms of the strap, which does seem like a little bit of a slip up maybe. I would understand if I didn't fit in this watch, but to have a better fit here seems unusual. And again, while it's got a pretty short lug to lug, just looks a little bit bigger, so if you're interested in this watch, definitely prepare for that. This one I'd say looks more like a 41.5mm watch, but it is nice to have that pretty short lug to lug. I do quite like the colour of this one. It's not hampered by the crystal. You still get a lot of punchiness through. Almost looks like the colour that ratio chronograph I looked at recently could have been if it had a better crystal, or if it matched what was online. These three all do a pretty good job of that, actually. They all look just like the online listings, and you get a nice sweep to all three of them as well with that Miyota 9000 movement. But my favourite of the three is definitely the black topography one. I'm not normally one for kind of tactical watches, but I think this looks pretty good. It's also a texture that you just don't see very often. You get lots of gear shape patterns, lots of the standard kind of bumps like you get on the green one here. But yeah, I can't really recall seeing much like this before with the grid lines too. In some ways, almost looks a bit like that kind of Damascus-like pattern, doesn't it? So yeah, this one might be my favourite from the range, even if it hasn't got anything extraordinary on the dial. Well, there is one thing that might be extraordinary, and that is the luminescence, because previous Erebus watches have been some of the very brightest that I've seen. And I'll lob all three down here just in case it varies by colour. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So all three look to have the same blue glow with the lume, but the backdrop of this red one definitely gets illuminated a bit when the torch is on. Not sure if that lasts though when the torch turns off, but But no, when the torch goes out, that does indeed fade away. And while that means all three are legible, perhaps that is a bit of a missed opportunity. Do wonder what sort of resources it would have taken to be able to get that wheel loomed as well, so that all of the indexes were also loomed. I think that would have been pretty interesting, especially given the theming of this watch. But the rest of the luminescence is very strong, as is often the case with this BGW stuff. That on the hands definitely outperforms those pips around the edge though. So there's a quick first look and overview of these Erebus 24 field watches. I really do have a feature there that you won't find on anything else pretty much. I think maybe there's one other watch in the last 10 years that's done something like this, and that is a watch that was much more expensive. I can't remember the brand off the top of my head, but it wasn't in the same ballpark. Both versions, or sizes by the way, do also seem to be the same price, and the colour selection is enormous as well, which is another thing that's always appreciated at launch. And again, very well made watch, just not quite in love with it.